Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Who needs all of those holiday specials when you've got family drama to keep things interesting? Today in the rLounge, we'll have you questioning if your own family gatherings are really all that bad. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to apologize for calling out my aunts at a wedding? I, 26 female, have been with my partner, 27 female, for 5 years, and we are getting married next year. Overall, the wedding planning has gone pretty smoothly until now. For context, there's a large age gap in my family when it comes to the grandchildren on my mother's side. My dad's an only child. My mother had me in her mid-20s, and my 2 aunts waited until they were in their late 30s to have kids. So I've just been more of an extra aunt to a lot of my cousins, as there's about 4 of them, all between 6 and 10, all girls, except for my cousin, Kate, 25 female, who is the daughter of my mother's older brother. Now, I love my family, I do, but my aunts have always been the kind of parents who can never say no to their precious children, and that has resulted in them being spoiled brats. Over the last decade, there has not been one family event that hasn't been ruined in some capacity by a child having a tantrum over something stupid. In the last year alone, we've had tantrums over not wanting to leave a party even though the party place was closing, not having the correct flavor of strawberry ice cream at our grandfather's 85th birthday, or just getting a pack of hair bows that didn't match each other's, and many others that, to be honest, the reasons why are so stupid they feel made up. And these tantrums are bad, like the full screaming, pounding the floor, and enough tears to water a field until their mothers give in to their demands. The husbands are just real walkovers, to be honest, and let their wives deal with the kids. It took a long time to even bring my partner to one of our many family events just because I always knew these tantrums were going to happen, and I didn't want to scare her away. I work with kids, so I know this is beyond not normal behavior of kids, and I know the lack of discipline is to blame, but I've never been in the position to call it out because, in my family, it's very much if you don't have kids, your opinion of how to raise them doesn't count. But as the kids have gotten older, it's gotten so much worse. Now on to the wedding planning. We are not having a large wedding because neither of us want it. Between our family members we want there and our friends, it's just over 100 people. My partner's family has no kids under 16, and when the idea of having a child-free wedding came up, it was clear my partner liked the idea of no one under 16, and to be honest, I was happy with it. As well as our dogs were going to fill the roles of ring bearer and flower girl anyway, and we both knew there was going to be at least one tantrum, and neither of us wanted to subject our friends and her family to those. My parents and grandparents agreed that it would be nice to have no kids for a change, and with that, we sent the invitations out. Not long after the invitations went out, we had my cousin Kate's wedding. She grew up 3 hours away and hasn't turned up to really any family events in the last decade, but her mother made her invite everyone to show off as there were over 400 people. Don't get me wrong, you could tell a lot of money was put into the event, and it was lovely, but I personally wouldn't have liked it for my day. Her new husband had a niece and nephew, so they did the flower girl and ring bearer roles. And yes, there were tantrums thrown when that news broke. And it only took 5 minutes into the wedding for a tantrum to happen because one of the kids wanted to sit in the front and not a few pews back. My partner has gotten into the habit after 4 years of these events of keeping track of the tantrums on her notes app, and she counted 3 in the church alone. It only got worse as it was raining after, and the kids didn't want to wear jackets to get to the car, and many tears happened. The meal wasn't much better, but thankfully we were at the head table with my grandparents away from it. But you couldn't not hear the whining and shouting occasionally throughout the meal. Things got bad when, at some point before dessert, 2 of the kids came up to me and asked why they were not invited to my wedding as they had been for Kate's. A bit stunned, I just replied that the place we were having it at was only for adults. That obviously was the wrong answer because almost immediately another tantrum about how apparently their parents had promised them they would be the flower girls at my wedding erupted. Thankfully, they're small for their age, so it was pretty easy to pick them up and move them away from the head table, which was on a stage and away from people staring. While this was happening, my parents were confronted by my aunts asking how it was that their kids were not invited. My parents just repeated the same thing as I had said, and this also wasn't good enough. At this point, my grandfather and I were behind them with 2 of their screaming children. I honestly don't know what came over me, but I blurted out, "You really cannot see why I might not want to have your children there on my wedding day? Can you please stop discussing this? Right now is not the time and people are already staring at us," and left. Well, let's just say that while most of my family agreed with what I said, now my aunts are refusing to attend the wedding until I apologize to them and their kids and invite them. Some family members think it was the wrong time to say anything or just apologize to keep the peace, but honestly, I don't want to, as I don't think what I said was that bad, especially considering the thing I knew that what the groom's family were saying after the wedding from what I heard from Kate and her new husband. Am I the a-hole has no consensus spot, but based on the comments, OP was not the a-hole. You're clearly not the a-hole here, OP. The majority of your family agrees with you. The only one who seems to be upset about it are the parents of the kids who have tantrums. It's not unrealistic to just want to have a nice evening without children. It's quite common. And if your aunt isn't coming on account of her children not being invited, then that's one less person you and your fiancé have to pay for. If other people are fine with 400 people at their wedding, that's on them. But a person only gets married once, most times, so best do it how you want it done. Update, December 27th, 2023. Okay, so never expected this post to get as much attention as it did, so yeah, here's an update. So yeah, Christmas happened, and yeah, it was apparently a crap show. I had planned ahead of time to spend Christmas with my partner and in-laws, who live over an hour away, and then celebrate Boxing Day back at home with my parents and grandparents. But to my surprise, my mother contacted me late on Christmas Day just to say the Boxing Day celebrations were called off after a disastrous Christmas meal with the family, which at the last minute included the aunts and the children. So apparently they had decided that as the family had been going no contact in the week since the events at my cousin Kate's wedding, they were going to turn up to my great-grandmother's house for Christmas and confront me about it to my face to make me apologize for calling out their kids' behavior. They usually do their own thing at Christmas and often go to their in-laws. Forgot to mention they are married to brothers who are two of the weirdest men I've ever met, but that's a rant for another day. I guess they thought if my 99-year-old great-grandmother, my mother's mom's mom, was present, I wouldn't refuse their demands. However, they failed to check that I might not be there, and according to my father, their faces when they realized their plan had backfired were hilarious. Obviously, their little terrors were running rampant and screaming their heads off, and one even had a temper tantrum because there were no presents for them under the tree. The aunts had turned up in the middle of Christmas meal several hours after all the presents were opened, but apparently the kid couldn't comprehend that, according to my aunt. At one point, my great-grandmother got so annoyed at the screaming, she yanked her hearing aids out. No one in the family had thought to fill her in with what had gone down at Kate's wedding. It was one of those we all thought someone else had done, so she was a bit confused at first. She knew the wedding was child-free, so she couldn't understand why they were making such a fuss about it, and just to get over it. She said she'd like to enjoy the likely last wedding she'll ever attend in peace, away from screaming children. My family has a very dark sense of humor. Between that and what I had said earlier, I think most of my family have just had enough of their crazy excuses. Obviously, after Great Granny said this, they went on about their poor angels, but they didn't have much of a leg to stand on, as pretty soon after they opened their mouths, the terrors had gotten into my grandmother's homemade baked Alaska and had dropped it, ruining the dessert for everyone. Apparently, my grandfather just snapped and told them to get out and let them enjoy one family event in peace, and they needed to get their children's behavior in order if they ever wanted to be invited to another family event, as their children's behavior was out of line and was only going to backfire on them the older they got. This man had served for over 10 years in the Army and another 25 years as a police officer, and is terrifying when he snaps. So understandably, they got out of there ASAP. My great-grandmother even opened one of her fancy bottles of whiskey to celebrate. My grandfather had been one of those who did not want to disinvite them and keep the peace. He's financially contributing to the wedding, but when I got home yesterday, he gave me full permission to rescind their invitations. I had originally decided to not rescind my aunt's invitations, but give them a warning that if they turn up with their children or try to cause a scene, they will be escorted off the property immediately. But now, after an emergency family meeting on Boxing Day, we ended up just rescinding their invitations, and instead just using what we would have spent on the 4 meals on jewelry for myself, my mom, grandmother, and great-grandmother as a memento. My parents and partner are 100% behind me on this, and we're lucky that our venue is owned by my soon-to-be in-laws, and with that, security is included in the cost, as they have had several crazy family members' stories from renting it out for weddings and events over the last 30-plus years. It's run in-house by my soon-to-be brother-in-law, so we have full control of who is allowed on the property during the wedding. My maid of honor and bestie has also volunteered herself in the case of one of them turning up in a white dress to be the one to take one for the team and spill a glass of red wine. Her backup plan is using my dogs, both West Highland Terriers, who will be at the wedding, who are trained to pee on command and have an accident. She's a drama teacher, so I'd be pretty confident in her being able to make it look convincing as an accident if a worst-case scenario happened. In terms of if I knew the kids coming up to me at the wedding was their parents' way of guilt-tripping me, yes, I did know. This is far from the first time it has happened. For example, when one of the terrors had their Holy Communion, it fell around the same time my partner and I had adopted our 2 dogs. We hadn't expected to get 2, but they were inseparable, and we just fell in love with them immediately and took both home. My job requires me to work Saturday mornings, so I couldn't attend the church service for the communion, and there was not a real way to get off, so early on, I made sure everyone knew I wouldn't be attending the church service, making sure to hand deliver a card with money in it for the child the day before, with a small gift, because apparently to my aunts, money doesn't count as a gift. Anyway, later on at the meal, the sister of the child who had their communion just came straight up to me during the event and asked me why I never turned up to the church in front of everyone and asked where was their puppy. Apparently, my aunt had told them one of my puppies was for them. Let's just say tantrums happened and the puppy they did end up getting lasted 1 week and now lives with my in-laws. They hadn't pulled that stunt in a while, at least not to myself, so I guess that's what threw me off more than anything else. As with what was said by Kate's in-laws not long after I got back to the table, Kate's now mother-in-law sent us over a round of drinks to help with our growing headaches, as there was a lot of how on earth did you deal with this on a regular basis, and oh boy, they're going to be nightmares when they're older. We were also betting with the rest of the bridal party when the next tantrum would happen. My partner won, betting when there would be one just before the speeches, and a few rounds of who could guess what the reason for the tantrum was, thanks to my partner's 4 years long notes. Kate's in-laws also share my family's dark humor, so later in the night we were betting which would be the worst once the teenage years and all those hormones hit. Was it the most adult way of dealing with it? Probably not, but was too drunk and annoyed to care about that. Now let's get a couple relevant comments. First one, glad things are working out and just have to say, loving your great-grandmother. The OP replies, oh truly, the woman is iconic. She also technically got this whole saga started as she set me up with my partner all those years ago. Someone else chimes in, 3 effing cheers for Grandpa and Great-Grandma. Those two are easily the heroes of this story. Of course, after the little craps ruined dessert, I wouldn't be surprised if other relatives were getting in line to tell the aunts off. The OP replies, oh yep, they ruined dessert for basically every family member over 50. It was about 25-ish people, and a lot of them live over a day's drive away, so only get my grandma's baked Alaska once a year at Christmas, so they were not pleased at all. Wow, yeah, your aunt isn't doing her kids any favors. If she keeps on enabling their behavior, then they truly are going to grow up to be little terrors. And honestly, thank goodness you weren't there for Christmas. It's honestly not surprising that your aunt's plan blew up in her face. She literally just proved your point and you didn't have to lift a finger. The real kicker is your great-grandma having to take her hearing aids out. In terms of rescinding invitations, that sounds like that's the best. Your aunt was trying to play mind games with you, not thinking you were actually a woman of your word. Joke's on her. Your money is better spent on mementos anyway. Congrats on dealing with all this with grace and a healthy dose of humor, OP. What would you do? What do you think of kids at weddings? What's been your experience? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you for following along today in the rLounge. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to share regarding today's content, we want to hear it. See you next time.